What's up and welcome back to a new video here on the channel. Today we're going to have a look at the new Magic the Gathering set, Magic the Gathering Final Fantasy, and the most important cards for Standard Constructed. So let's get started. So first up, we're going to have a look at the top 15 most important cards from Final Fantasy for Standard Constructed. Now these cards will be like all around good cards, or they're already like slot perfectly into top tier standard decks. We're going to have a look at like Final Fantasy exclusive archetypes later on in the video too, but these 15 cards are just cards that I think are going to have the most impact on Standard as it is right now. Also, these will not be in a particular like order, they're just like random, so it's not necessarily ranked. Anyways, let's get started. So we're going to start off here with Ambrosia Whiteheart, a 2-mana 2/2, a legendary creature bird with flash. When Ambrosia enters, you may return another permanent you control to its owner's hand. And landfall, whenever a land you control enters, Ambrosia Whiteheart gets +1/+0 until the end of turn. Now, Ambrosia Whiteheart is going to automatically slot into these self-bounce decks that are played a lot in Standard. You can think about Ortsoft self-bounce, Absent self-bounce, Esper self-bounce, but I think Ambrosia is probably going to be the most important in Ortsoft and Absent, as they don't have access to town ain't big enough. And the cooler thing about Ambrosia is that it ends up picking up another permanent you control. So technically with Ambrosia, you could pick up lands if you want to care about like another landfall trigger. But that's more like exclusive to like the Chocobo archetype within Final Fantasy. But I thought it's cool to mention. But yeah, Ambrosia, you know, self-bounce is so powerful in Standard and it picks up another great creature with flash. It's definitely going to see a good amount of Standard play. Up next, we have Ultima, a 5-mana sorcery that destroys all artifacts and creatures, and you end the turn. I think Ultima is especially going to be incredibly relevant after rotation when we lose a lot of powerful board wipes, namely Sunfall. But for now, I already think that Ultima is going to make a pretty like powerful impact, as it seems to be a really great target to hate on these Quarry Steel Cutter decks, as it destroys all artifacts and all creatures. Now, another thing that's really important about Ultima is that it ends the turn, meaning that it kind of shuts down death triggers. And in a way like that, it's sort of similar to Sunfall. I mean, Sunfall exiles, so, you know, different, but something like Ultima does stop triggers from like a Heartfire hero, for instance. So I think it's a really great board wipe to be picking up, and especially the artifact part makes it so that I think it's already going to have an impact in the current state of Standard, but especially in the future after rotation, it's going to get even better. Ultima all around just seems like a powerful card. Up next, we have Battle Menu, a 2-mana instant. Now you might be looking at this card and thinking, Ash, what the hell is this doing here? To that, I have to say, hear me out, because the flexibility of this card is what makes it so powerful in my opinion. So you get to choose one attack where you create a 2/2 white knight creature token, ability where target creature gets +0/+4 until the end of turn, magic where you destroy a target creature with power 4 or greater, or item where you gain 4 life. So I think this card is so good. Like I said, the versatility of it all goes incredibly hard. You can create a 2/2 white knight creature token at instant speed, which can just be incredibly powerful, but that potentially blowing somebody out, potentially putting like a new attacker in play when your opponent doesn't expect it. The ability +0/+4 could get a creature out of cutdown range, towards the tower range, or make it like a much better blocker than your opponent would expect. Magic, where you destroy a target creature with power 4 or greater, super relevant in the Standard format. An item you gain 4 life could maybe, you know, make you survive from the brink of death. I think white is already very well positioned in the current format, and Battle Menu is just so good thanks to its versatility. I think it's going to see a good amount of play in Standard. Then we have the Astrologion's Planisphere, a 2-mana artifact equipment with job select. So when this equipment enters, you create a 1/1 colorless hero creature token and you attach this to it. The equipped creature is a wizard in addition to its other types, and has whenever you cast a non-creature spell, whenever you draw your 3rd card each turn, you put a 1/1 counter on this creature with an equip cost of 2. Now I think this card is going to slot beautifully into the best deck in the format, which is at Prowess. Not only is it an artifact equipment, so it's a way for you to trigger Prowess on all your creatures, it's also fantastic payoff for the insane amount of non-creature spells that deck plays. This card is going to grow large, and the larger it grows, the better of a target for monsters' rage it becomes. But I also feel like it's so powerful that it can be a secondary win con if you end up not finding your Quarry Steel Cutters. Like, the pressure of this card is just going to be ridiculous. You can always re-equip it to another creature and like keep it going, right? But also, I think that's really special about this is that the trend we're kind of seeing in these Quarry Steel decks is that they're playing less and less creature cards. I think during the recent regional championship, it was kind of the trend to take out your Swift Spears and be working with like, you know, more non-creature spells. And I think we also saw like an increase in Drake Hatchers. But I think the Astrologian's Planisphere is another reason for these Core Seal decks to go even lower on creatures and just really focus on those non-creature spells. And this is another card that makes a creature token for them. Yeah, I think it's going to be incredibly powerful in the deck list, and, you know, consider me scared already. Up next, we have Cecil Dark Knight, a 1-mana 2/3 legendary creature human knight with Death Touch and Darkness. So whenever Cecil deals damage, you lose that much life. Then if your life total is less than or equal to half your starting life total, you untap Cecil and transform it into Cecil the Redeemed Paladin, which is a 4/4 legendary creature human knight with lifelink and protect. Whenever Cecil attacks, other attacking creatures gain indestructible until the end of turn. Well, I just think that a 1-mana 2/3 with Death Touch is absolutely ridiculous. It makes a fantastic attacker, it makes a fantastic blocker, and you really don't even suffer under the fact that you lose a little bit of life when Cecil deals some damage. Black is kind of like the color of gaining life right now with cards like Shouldered, Carsey Revenant, and Holy Annex. Like, you really don't mind. And in a worst case scenario where your life total is like, you know, half than your starting life total would be, you can transform Cecil and make a 4/4 creature with lifelink attached to it and add a really powerful, like, indestructible effect. Cecil just reads like a card that is incredibly powerful, and any black deck in the format feels happy to pick it up, in my opinion, as it's just such an efficient attacker and blocker. Like, it is fantastic, and I almost can't believe it's real. Like, that is great stats for a 1-drop. Next on my list, I have Zodiark, the Umbral God. This is a 5-mana 5/5 legendary creature god with indestructible. This costs like 5 black mana to cast, but when Zodiark enters, each player sacrifices half the non-god creatures they control of their choice, rounded down. Whenever a player sacrifices another creature, you put a 1/1 counter on Zodiark. So kind of like in a worst case scenario, I think Zodiark is going to be like a 7/7 with indestructible. Hopefully it comes closer to being like a 9/9, but it also has potential to grow if you play more sacrifice effects, and the more you build your deck around Zodiark, the better it becomes. Like, I'm also thinking about Zodiark in combination with something like Sephiroth, which is going to be really cool, but Zodiark fits into like more strategies than just sacrifice. Like, it could also just be a bomb in a mono black deck list, but we've also seen 5-pip cards being cast in like certain, you know, Golgari or Dimir decks, so it doesn't have to be just a mono black card. But I just think when Zodiark comes down, it's such a bomb that hopefully your deck's built right, so you don't suffer too much under having to sacrifice your own creatures. Hopefully it really negatively impacts your opponent. Then all of a sudden you have a massive creature on the board with indestructible that's going to put a really fast clock in your opponent. Also makes a great target for something like Carsey Revenant, where you could just give it lifelink. And honestly, this card just reads so incredibly strong to me that, you know, I think we're going to see quite a lot of Zodiark. Another great pickup for these black decks, which, you know, they kind of need it. A lot of the standard format is just like Jeskai colored right now. So, you know, the new black cards are very much welcome, and both Cecil and Zodiark, I think, are very, very nice. So looking forward to it. Next on my list, I have Opera Love Song, a 2-mana instant where you choose one, you exile the top 2 cards of your library, and you may play those cards until your next end step. Or 1 or 2 target creatures each get +2/+0 until the end of turn. I think this card is going to be an incredible pickup for red aggro decks, especially decks that have that mouse package in there. As a +2/+0 basically means getting 2 Valiant triggers, so incredible on cards like Heartfire Hero or Emberheart Challenger. It's also relevant in combination with Manifold Mouse, which gives them double strike. And in another scenario, it's almost like a questing druid, where you can exile the top 2 cards of your library. You do have to play them until your next end step, so this is probably a card that, just like questing druid, you're firing off on your opponent's turn, so you can take advantage of the cards on your turn and have, you know, 2 fresh new cards to work with. I think it's incredible. +2/+0 is crazy. Instant speed is awesome. And yeah, the Valiant triggers are really going to enjoy this one. So a great pickup for the mouse package. If you enjoy that, you know, it's so good. Once again, one of those cards where I'm like, I cannot believe this is real, but it is. And the mouse package is really going to enjoy it. Up next, we have Self-Destruct, a 2-mana instant where target creature you control deals X damage to any other target and X damage to itself, where X is its power. This is probably one of the best fling effects I've seen in a very long time. at instant speed. Being able to just like fling a ton of damage towards your opponent's face is crazy. Works really well with these like creatures that have those death effects like Heartfire Hero or Cacophony Scamp, but also just ridiculous with something like Screaming Nemesis, where not only are you dealing like the 3 damage, but it's also dealing the damage to itself, so you get additional damage on top of that. It's also great in response to removal, for instance, like if you're swinging with a whole board and you're expecting your opponent to remove something, you could always decide to go out on your own terms and cast like Self-Destruct and also throw the damage into their face anyways. There's some really cool shenanigans with like Self-Destruct and Death Touch. Self-Destruct can also be good with cards that have a higher toughness than they have power, in a way to like, you know, remove something. Yeah, this is a fantastic pickup for any decks that care about these like fling effects, or just in general like mono red aggro. There's also some really fun shenanigans possible with this, like I'm definitely going to be cooking up Jumbo Cactuar Self-Destruct, where I'm throwing a ton of damage into my opponent's face, because that's going to be a lot of fun. But in general, this is going to be crazy in, you know, red aggro decks, also in like leyline decks, and yeah, truly one of the best fling effects I've seen in a long time. Next on my list, I have Diamond Weapon, a 9 mana 8/8 legendary artifact creature elemental, which costs 1 less to cast for each permanent card in your graveyard with reach, and immune, where you prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to Diamond Weapon. So Golgari Self-Mill has been really close to being a like tier 2 deck in Standard. I think during the last Standard Pro Tour, there was a player that managed to get top 8 with Golgari Self-Mill, especially like taking advantage of those up the beanstalk triggers. And the deck was so close, but it's missing a little bit of like power, and Diamond Weapon is probably the best Self-Mill payoff card that we have in Standard. You know, the immune effect where you prevent combat damage is insane. And in the Discord, we also did a little bit of the math. And technically speaking, it is possible to get Diamond Weapon out on turn 3 if the Self-Mill gods favor you that day. So imagine seeing this creature come down on turn 3, which would be ridiculous. And also the reach is like fire on it. This is kind of like the ultimate card that Golgari Self-Mill is looking for. And there's another like couple of cards from Final Fantasy that really work with the Self-Mill, Golgari Self-Mill archetype. So Diamond Weapon is going to push Golgari Self-Mill into the top tier, like Standard decks in my opinion, and this is going to be an incredible card. I also like the fact that it's an artifact, so it dodges a certain amount of removal. It's an elemental, which can be relevant because a Nissa can grab it. Not sure if that's what you want to do, but it has a lot of relevant creature types, massive 8/8, triggers beans, looks at cards in like permanent cards, so not just like creatures or something like that. It's everything Self-Mill players are looking for and more, and this is going to be seeing a lot of Standard play. Then on my list, I have Tifa Lockhart. This is a 2 mana 1/2 legendary creature human monk with trample and landfall. Whenever a land you control enters, double Tifa Lockhart's power until the end of turn. Now Tifa is on this list because she slots into a wide variety of like deck list. I could see her in a mono green, I could see her in a dedicated landfall deck, I could see her in like a leyline deck list, like a red or Gruul leyline deck. And Tifa is on my list as like the top 15 cards because there's actually a turn 3 win possible with Tifa, which involves Titanic Growth, where you give the card +4/+4. Then you also want to have a Fabled Passage in play, so you could get like double those landfall triggers. And the rest is history. The card goes from 5 to 10 and from 10 to 20. You're swinging at somebody with a 20/20 creature with trample. Turn 3 seems perfectly on par with the speed of Standard. So, and it also slots into a, you know, like I said, a variety of different deck lists. Tifa is going to be one of the really like cool, you know, combos to pull off in Standard with Final Fantasy, and I think we'll be seeing a lot of players try it and see if they can get the turn 3 win with Tifa. So next up, we're going from one Final Fantasy baddie to another. Up next is Yuna, Hope of Spira, a 5 mana 3/5 legendary creature human cleric. And during your turn, Yuna and enchantment creatures you control have trample, lifelink, and ward 2. At the beginning of your end step, you return up to 1 target enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. So the way I'm seeing Yuna is just a fantastic like bomb card and build around card in the format. I think Yuna could already slot beautifully into something like you know, Zur Overlords, and maybe she would even replace Zur in the first place. You do have to build the deck a little bit differently, but Yuna reanimating these Overlords can be incredibly powerful. I think she could work in like an Abzan deck, a Band deck, or like a Naya deck, maybe even 5 colors if you're feeling silly. But she's not only good with the Overlords, she's also fantastic at working with these new like Final Fantasy Saga creatures. She could summon like Bahamut or something, which would be awesome, or Knights of the Round. And honestly, I think this is even like Omniscience, right? Like the first thing that people think about when they see Yuna is like Omniscience. I feel that may be overkill. You're probably better off getting like one of these like bomb creatures out of Yuna, but it's going to be ridiculous because not only does she also give ward to herself, so it's going to be a lot more difficult to remove on curve. She protects the enchantment creatures as well, gives them trample and lifelink, which is insane. And the most important thing I think that makes the card as good as I think it is that it triggers immediately on the beginning of your end step. Like if the card would trigger at the beginning of your upkeep, it would be a lot more vulnerable. If somebody has shields down and you slam a Yuna, like it's probably going to be GG's. You know, it's probably going to be GG's, especially if these like overlords or like saga creatures or whatever's out there have like a really strong ETB effect, which a lot of them do, spoiler alert. Yeah, Yuna is going to be, I wouldn't say like the new Zur, because the card plays quite differently, but she's going to be ridiculously strong and slot into a wide variety of like enchantment forward like strategies and self-mill forward strategies. And I think Yuna might be the next villain in the format. We'll see. Next on my list, I have Joshua Phoenix Dominant, a 3-mana 3/4 legendary creature human noble wizard. When Joshua enters, you discard up to 2 cards, then draw that many cards. For 5 mana and a tap, you can exile Joshua and return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control, activate only as a sorcery. Where you get Phoenix Warden of Fire, a 4/4 flying lifelink legendary enchantment creature. With the first and second chapter, the Rising Flames, the Phoenix deals 2 damage to each opponent. The Phoenix deals 2 damage, so you also get some lifelink out of that. And Flames of Rebirth, return any number of target creature cards with total mana value 6 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Exile the Phoenix and then return it to the battlefield front face up, so you get Joshua back. Now Joshua just slots beautifully into these like top tier, you know, draw the discard strategies. Think about like Jeskai Oculus or Boros Monument. I think Joshua is going to be an absolute bomb and is just going to just take over games the second it doesn't get removed, especially once you can get that flip going and potentially have that massive reanimator moment, which could bring back some Oculus for you, or like a Fear of Missing Out, or a Tursa if you still want to play that card into these strategies. Yeah, the Reanimator like strategy is just crazy on a 4/4 flying lifelink creature, but also Joshua as just a creature without the transform effect. A 3-mana 3/4 body is fantastic. The ETB effect is desirable. We see a lot of that happening in Standard. And I truly think Joshua is one of the most powerful cards from Final Fantasy for Standard. So huge pickup for the discard decks. And I cannot wait to be shoving Joshua in some of my favorite decks because I love the draw the discard strategy in Standard. Up next, I have Vivi, of course, the 3-mana 0/3 legendary creature wizard that everybody fears, with an activated ability for 0, where you add X mana in any combination of blue and or red, where X is Vivi's power, activate only during your turn and only once each turn. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, put a 1/1 counter on Vivi and it deals 1 damage to each opponent. Now automatically Vivi slots into that Prowess deck list that is like the best deck in the format right now. People have speculated on Vivi in combination with something like Monstrous Rage, which is just ridiculous. But there's also like potential with Vivi in these like combo decks. Thanks to her sweet like activated ability, I could see Vivi doing some stuff with an Agatha Soul Cauldron and maybe part of like a crazy like a deck list that ends up growing a creature large as hell and like finishing the game with like a Banefire like effect. But in general, like Vivi slotting perfectly into like the top tier deck in the format right now, but also just, you know, slowly growing and then also dealing damage for all those non-creature spells that you're casting and just making an unreal target for Monstrous Rage. Like Vivi is going to be a pain in the ass and probably a kill on sight. Like this card is crazy. I think everybody has, you know, anticipated Vivi as one of the more powerful cards in the format, and I think you guys are all right. Like Vivi is going to do some crazy stuff. Next on my list, I have the best adventure land from Final Fantasy, Midgar City of Mako. So this is a town. These adventure lands, they come and play tapped and tap for 1 color, but they have an adventure attached to them. So Midgar has the Reactor Raid, which is a 3-mana sorcery where you can sacrifice an artifact or creature, and if you do draw 2 cards. Now I think that's just ridiculous, like such an effect on a land. Like, are we for real? You know, like it's just one of those like effects that just makes you want to play a tap land any day. Like, I do not care that this land comes in play tapped. The fact that I could just get rid of an artifact that's laying around or get rid of a creature that isn't really doing anything and draw 2 fresh new cards It's just crazy. Like, it's crazy. I think some of the adventure lands are a little bit underwhelming. It also depends a lot on your deck list, whether or not you can afford to play these adventure lands. Because if you're playing a deck that needs to curve out, you know, it's not really happening. Like, aggro decks will have a lot more difficulty playing these like tap lands, whereas like mid-range decks and slower strategies can very easily just jam these adventure lands and not really have a lot of downside to it. I also think the blue one, G-Door, is pretty interesting in combination with Jace. Because it mills like half of your opponent's library for like 6 mana as the adventure side. But I thought Midgar was a little bit stronger, as like I value card draw really high, especially card draw on a land. Like, what are we talking about? It's so good. I wanted to feature an adventure land, and I think Midgar is definitely the best we have to offer. So really excited to shove this into all my black decks, my sacrifice decks. This is a banger with a capital B. Now, last but certainly not least, we have Starting Town. This is a rare land, and this enters tapped unless it's your first, second, or third turn of the game. It taps for colorless, but you can also tap it and paying 1 life, and then you add 1 mana of any color. Now, this is the rare land that Standard has been looking for so long. 3-color mana bases are going to be so happy picking up Starting Town. Even after rotation, when we're losing all the pain lands and half of the fast lands, Starting Town is also going to be picked up like by 2-color deck list. But at the moment, like if we really want to make 3-color strategies happen in Standard, Starting Town is just going to be immediately slammed off as a 4-off in that. There's one card from the whole set that I would say, okay, if you want to spend your wildcards, go grab that one. It's Starting Town, as this card is just going to be fixing so many mana bases already at this point in time, but especially in the future after rotation happens. This is exactly the land that Standard needed, and I'm so happy that we finally have received a card like this. So we're ending on a banger here. Next in this video, we're going to be talking about the top 5 established archetypes that benefit the most from Final Fantasy. So the new cards are really going to be pushing this deck like up a tier, or going to be making it a lot more competitively viable. Let's dive into it. So the first archetype that is going to benefit the most from Final Fantasy, that is already present in Standard and is only going to get better, is Orzhov Sacrifice. You know I am already over the moon with cards like Sephiroth and Midgar. Sephiroth being just such a great build around 3 mana, 3/3 legendary creature, human avatar soldier. And whenever Sephiroth enters or attacks, you may sacrifice another creature if you do draw a card. That's a great ETB effect. And whenever another creature dies, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life, which is kind of like a Blood Artist effect. And if this is a 4-time this ability has resolved this turn, you transform Sephiroth into Sephiroth, the One-Winged Angel, a 5/5 creature with flying. As this creature transforms into Sephiroth, One-Winged Angel, you get an emblem with whenever a creature dies, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life, which is basically a Blood Artist emblem. Whenever Sephiroth attacks, you may sacrifice any number of other creatures, and if you do draw that many cards. So Sephiroth could be cool with something like Phantom Train from the set, which is basically a free sacrifice outlet. Unfortunately, it's on a 4-mana card and not a 3-mana card. But Sephiroth could also work with things like Zodiark, which could sacrifice like a ton of creatures. All it needs to see is the ability happening 4 times. So it means that your opponent's creatures like dying or getting sacrificed also works. We see cards like Vayne's Treachery, which I think are going to be like efficient for this strategy too, where you sacrifice your own creature and you destroy a creature of your opponent. Sephiroth could work with things like Mobilizing, which is going to be interesting with something like Avenger of the Fallen, or that like white 2-drop that I forget, the Voice of Victory, I believe. I was almost forgetting the name there. So a lot of ways to try and enable Sephiroth. We still have like cards like Bartholomew and Orzhov as well. I think Orzhov benefits the most from the sacrifice stuff. But you know I'm going to give it my best to make Sephiroth happen, and I hope that the new cards that are supporting Sacrifice as a deck from Final Fantasy, even like Midgar as like a rare land that we can take advantage of to draw some more cards, is finally going to be enough to push Sacrifice back into the tier 2 range of standard competitive deck list. I'm staying optimistic, and I think Sephiroth is going to make it happen. Next on this list is Izzet Prowess, which is already the best deck in the format, without a doubt. However, Final Fantasy is giving it a lot more like new toys to play with. Most importantly, Vivi and the Planisphere, in my opinion. Vivi and Planisphere both really taking advantage of the high amount of non-creature spells that the deck list plays. There's also a couple of other cards that I think are worth experimenting with within the Izzet Prowess deck, like Haste Magic and the Opera Love Song. Both are cards that are non-creature spells, but also are a way for you to not run out of fuel. Like that's one of the most important things in the Izzet Prowess deck. You constantly want to like keep firing off non-creature spells, and both of these cards are also ways for you to, you know, put new cards in exile and be able to play them that turn. So a great way for you to keep that fuel going and keep casting those like double spells so you can get those Scoria Steel triggers, or also now triggering your VV or triggering your Planisphere, which is yeah, going to be very powerful. Now it's just, you know, the question is whether or not the decks think that these cards are worth playing. I think there's a good shot that they end up, you know, landing on the decision being yes, and it means that the top deck in the format is going to be getting you know, a lot more support from Final Fantasy, which, yeah. Next on my list is Leyline Aggro, specifically Gruul Leyline Aggro, with cards like Tifa and Self-Destruct from Final Fantasy. Tifa being a fantastic new creature to throw those like pump effects onto, and then maybe like fire off a land after that so you can double her power. The card's got Trample, which is exactly what you're looking for in these like Leyline like pump decks. Self-Destruct being a great way for you to sacrifice the creature that you've pumped up into the heavens. Also works really nicely with Heartfire Hero and Cacophony Scamp, which are already present in that deck list. There's also like potential for these decks, just like the Izzet deck we mentioned before, to play something like Haste Magic or Opera Love Song, which is a way for you to never run out of fuel, as you also be able to exile like a new card from the top of your library and potentially be able to replay it. And you know, maybe you'll find another Monster's Rage to shove onto something. So yeah, I think there's a lot of support for Leyline Aggro for Final Fantasy, and that's already like a deck that's, you know, every now and then does a lot of damage on the competitive scene. People are starting to play a lot more removal, and then it falls off a little bit. But with this new support, and also, you know, Self-Destruct being a reason for this deck list to not have to play that kind of like shitty black adventure creature with that sacrifice effect in red, and Self-Destruct being instant speed is definitely going to be a game changer in my opinion. Next on my list of archetypes that are going to get a nice boost from Final Fantasy is Golgari Self-Mill, and I mostly want to talk about like Diamond Weapon and Town Greeter in here. So like I said during the first half of the video, I think Golgari Self-Mill has been really close to being a powerful deck list. It's a deck that can really take advantage of Up the Beanstalk, and it was just looking for a little bit more support to like pack an extra punch. And we saw a lot of the potential from the deck list already when it got top 8 during a standard Pro Tour. But I think Diamond Weapon just being like the ultimate, like the strongest self-mill payoff creature we have in standard. And also like Town Greeter, a 2-mana 1/1. When this creature enters, mill 4 cards. And you may put a land card from among them into your hand. If you put a town card into your hand, this way you gain 2 life. We don't really care about the towns. We care about that this is a 2-mana creature, which counts as a permanent, that mills 4 cards for you and gives you a land back. Like, that digs incredibly deep. It's going to be a great creature to be playing a Golgari Self-Mill and really help you out with that consistency. We also have like cards like the Black Overlord that are really good in here, and Mold Tender and stuff. So I think Golgari Self-Mill is really going to be a tier 2 deck finally, especially with that Beanstalk backup plan that is going to give you a lot of card advantage. And we still have a lot of other like cards in standard that are mostly in black that get discounted based off of like cards in your graveyard, and they're going to be working really well with Diamond Weapon. But Diamond Weapon definitely is like peak for that deck list, and it's going to be doing so much. So really high hopes for Golgari Self-Mill with some great support from Final Fantasy. There's also X-Death that's worth talking about. I wonder if X-Death wants to be played in that deck as well. I mean, it is like self-mill payoff in Golgari colors. It has that sweet transform going for it, so it wouldn't surprise me. But yeah, Golgari self-mill players, this is our time. And the last archetype on this list is going to be a Reanimator, and we're going to be talking about Summon Bahamut and Arden the Usurper. I'm especially hyped about Arden. Arden is an 8-mana 4/4 legendary creature, Elder Human Noble, where demons you control have menace, lifelink, and haste. And Star Scourge, where at the beginning of combat on your turn, you exile up to 1 target creature card from a graveyard. So it can be any graveyard. And if you exile a card this way, you create a token that's a copy of that card, except it's a 5/5 black demon. Now, I think Arden is also going to change the way Mono Black plays for good. I think Mono Black is going to be leaning more into a Reanimator angle, where you play cards like Zombify to be able to grab Arden and be able to grab like Velgavoth, and possibly also be able to grab Summon Bahamut, as it is a 9-mana 9/9 flying creature that destroys the target non-land permanent on the 1st and 2nd chapter. Third chapter draws you 2 cards, and if the creature survives long enough for you to get the Mega Flare, the last chapter, it deals damage equal to the total mana value of other permanents you control to each opponent, which should be good enough to just win you the game at that point. But yeah, especially Arden in like a mono black demon deck list, the card is just unreal. You do have to reanimate it as it's a little bit expensive, but the second it comes down, it starts like popping off immediately at the beginning of combat. All your demons are going to have Menace and Lifelink and Haste. There's also ways to play this card in like a Reckless Reanimator, which was a deck that saw quite a lot of popularity at the start of Tarkir because it won like a standard like qualifier for something with cards like FOMO and being able to grab back like an Atali or something. And Arden is going to be a really cool part of the puzzle where not only can you grab like an additional card, but you also can grab things at your opponent's graveyard. But I think I'm mostly hyped for Arden in like a mono black deck list, especially once some like good cards from mono black rotate, like Shuldred. Arden is going to be here to change the dynamic of mono black for good and give it more of a reanimator angle. But in general, like reanimator in the set's just looking so good. I'm talking about like black reanimator stuff with Zombify. But like we've mentioned a couple times in this video, cards like Yuna and as well as Awakening are also getting like a lot of stonks from Final Fantasy. But yeah, reanimating, just a ton more like great reanimator targets, like all these enchantment creature sagas can be reanimated. Arden is just a great way for you to get there. And yeah, really hyped to see how the future of Reanimator is going to look like, and I think it gets a lot of support from Final Fantasy. Up next, we're going to have a look at 5 card pairs that are going to make a new deck exist in Standard. They're going to give birth to an archetype that is not really seeing any Standard play at all because it didn't have enough support. And thanks to these cards from Final Fantasy, it's going to become an archetype that is going to be Standard playable. So this is kind of like the Brewer's Kitchen vibe. So let's dive into it. For the first pair, supporting Boros equipment, we have Cloud Midgard Mercenary and Roban, Bull of Alamigo. So Cloud Midgard Mercenary is a 2-mana 2/1, a legendary creature, human soldier mercenary. When Cloud enters, you search your library for an equipment card, reveal it, put it into your hand, and shuffle. And as long as Cloud is equipped, if an ability of Cloud or an equipment attached to it triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. And then we have Roban, which is a 2-mana 2/2 with a ward, pay life equal to Roban's power. And whenever Roban attacks, attach up to one target equipment, you control the target attacking creature. So I'm featuring Roban in here because, you know, free equips are always really important. But the Boros equipment deck is going to take advantage of a lot of like job select potentially, or still those like old for mirroring cards. But all we know is that Final Fantasy is giving a lot of support to Boros equipments. You know, the play design really wanted to make equipments a thing in the format. And cards like Cloud, which is going to be able to tutor up an equipment for you, and Roban, which is going to be able to equip something for free, are going to be really good. We're also seeing cards like Freya, which I'm not featuring in here, but Freya is kind of like a Llanowar Elves for equipment specifically, which is going to do a lot, ramp you up into these, you know, important equipments on 3 mana. We see things like the Buster Sword. You could think about like Zac Fair to protect your stuff. There are so many like equipment supporting cards in Final Fantasy, and I would be shocked if, you know, Boros equipments isn't going to be like a tier 2.5 standard playable deck list. Like if Final Fantasy isn't going to make Boros equipments happen, nothing will. And I think Cloud and Roban are definitely going to be some of the most powerful cards in the Boros equipment deck list. The next pair on my list is Zell and the Traveling Chocobo. Zell is a 3-mana 0/3 legendary creature, human monk, and you may play an additional land on each of your turns. Zell gets +1/+0 for each land you control, and at the beginning of your end step, return a land you control to its owner's hand. And then the Traveling Chocobo, a 3-mana 3/2 bird. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play lands and cast bird spells from the top of your library. If a land or a bird you control entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. Maybe I'm too optimistic because I really want it to happen, but I think that the Chocobo landfall deck has solid like tier 2 potential, especially with cards like Zell. It's really important in these landfall decks that you make sure that you have a land to play every turn so you get the trigger off of it. And Zell being able to pick up a land for you so you can replay it again is very valuable. The Traveling Chocobo, like doubling the landfall triggers off of you and also allowing you to play lands and birds from the top of your library. I think the Chocobos have a lot of support. I think I see the most potential in Gruul. But there's also a banned Chocobo deck possible with the Choco, the banned legendary bird, and that would be a little bit more of a slower, like mid-range value-coded strategy, whereas the Gruul deck is going to be a lot more aggressive. and also have access to Shoko Comet, which is a card that I'm really excited for. Shoko Comet makes like a 2/2 bird for you, a bird token, and also can deal a ton of damage to any target. So it's kind of like payoff for playing a lot of lands, and it's good kind of like any point of the curve. So Chocobos, Landfall are getting a lot of support. Final Fantasy is really trying to make Landfall a deck with the Chocobos, and I think they're going to succeed. I think the cards are looking very powerful, and I think we're having a new like tier 2 deck list on our hands in Chocobo Landfall. The next pair on my list is Sarah Ferron and Venet Heart of Hydaelyn, which are representing the legendary strategy in Final Fantasy. Sarah Ferron is a 3-mana 2/2 legendary creature, and the first legendary creature spell you cast each turn costs 2 less to cast. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control 2 or more other legendary creatures, you may transform Sarah into the Crystallized Sarah, which is a legendary artifact, and the first legendary creature spell you cast each turn costs 2 less to cast, and legendary creatures get +2/+2. And then we have Venet Heart of Hydaelyn, which is a 3-mana 3/3, and whenever you cast a legendary spell, you draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. So I'm using these cards as like an example to represent the legendary like archetypes and synergies that are present within Final Fantasy, because there are so many legendary creatures in the set. Probably more legendary creatures than we've seen in any set before. But I think legendary strategies are still really relevant. Any Joins Up is one of my favorite cards to build around. We still have a lot of legendary support in the standard, which is legal thanks to like DMU, like things like Plaza of Heroes or the Relic. So many legend supports. There's got to be like a legendary forward deck that's going to be making an impact. And I think Sarah Ferron and Venet are great payoff cards for the legendary like archetype. And I cannot wait to cook up something spicy with these cards. The next pair on my list is Yuna Hope of Spira and Terra Magical Adept, representing the enchantment forward synergies that are present in Final Fantasy. I think you're going to be making like an enchantment reanimator deck happen. Yuna Hope of Spira is a 5-mana 3/5. During your turn, Yuna and enchantment creatures you control have trample, lifelink, and ward 2. Beginning of your end step, you return with 1 target enchantment card from your grave to the battlefield with a finale counter on it. And Terra is a 3-mana 4/2, and when Terra enters, you mill 5 cards. Put up to 1 enchantment card, mill this way into your hand. So I think there's honestly so many directions to take when it comes to these like enchantment reanimator strategies or like enchantment matter strategies. I think Naya shows the most potential for me, but you could also be thinking about like Bend or like Abzan. I think as long as your deck's playing Yuna, you could do a lot of things. But honestly, Terra is also one of those cards that could see play in like a Delirium deck, like anything that cares about having enchantments in the graveyard, or just like another like Gruul forward enchantment deck list. But I think these cards together are going to be like representing a beautiful like new deck that's going to take place, where we're trying to like reanimate these massive like overlords that already are fantastic in standard, as you might be aware of, but also like these new saga creatures, like the enchantment creatures, like summon Bahamut or summon Knights of the Round, which are just explosive as hell. And if you can find a way to shove them in a graveyard and bring them back out, which reminds you, we still also have Abuelo's Awakening. All you care about is having like a strong ETB effect, and it could be worth cooking with. Or, you know, you could also reanimate those cards with like a Zombify. It just depends on what colors you're in. I think the archetype is really flexible and can be played in so many different ways. Like I said, personally, the most excited for Naya, but I think Yuna and Terra are like doing a great job here representing the enchantment synergies in Final Fantasy, and I am really hyped, and I think it's going to be a banger of a deck list, and hopefully a strong tier 2 contender. So the last pair on this list is going to be Matoya the Arcan Elder and Golbez. So this is not really representing like a specific archetype, but I think Matoya is so powerful that Matoya is just going to make a new deck happen in standard. Matoya is a 3-mana 1/4. Whenever you scry or surveil, you draw a card. And Golbez is here for synergy because whenever you control an artifact you control enters, you get the surveil 1. Then it has the beginning of your end step. If you control 4 or more artifacts, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. And then if you control 8 or more artifacts, each opponent loses life equal to that card's power. I'm not sure if like the mere artifacts is the best way to take advantage of Matoya, but I think Matoya is going to give birth to a deck that's really trying to take advantage of that scry and surveil ability, which can turn into card draw. You have like the surveil lands. There's a lot of other ways it can just like scry for you very easily. Maybe Matoya is going to be played in like a mono blue. I don't really know. It feels like the world is your oyster with Matoya, and you know, scrying and surveilling is very present within standard, and drawing cards off of it, not just once a turn, like every time you do it. Surely it's got to be a banger. So I'll be cooking up a Matoya deck as much as I can. but I really wanted to feature this card in this video because I think there's great potential with this card. Drawing cards has always been a great strategy in Magic the Gathering, and Matoya is certainly going to draw you a lot of cards. So I'm being optimistic here and thinking that Matoya is going to give like birth to a new deck in Standard that is going to be capable of drawing a ton of cards and overwhelming you with card advantage. And the last category in this video are my 5 favorite cards to brew around in Final Fantasy. These are cards that I haven't mentioned yet in like the previous categories, and I still wanted to give them a special spot in this video because I'm really excited to build a deck around these cards. Doesn't mean that they're going to be the most competitive thing that you could do, but they're going to be a lot of fun. First up in this category is the one and only Jumbo Cactuar. You already know I had to mention this guy. A 7 mana 1/7 creature plant with 10,000 needles. Whenever this creature attacks, it gets plus 9,999 plus 0 until the end of turn. I'm kind of envisioning building the Jumbo Cactuar in like a Smuggler Surprise deck, where I'm just slamming the card out of nowhere and hopefully it can deal a ton of damage. I think I want to try and win the game by using like self-destruct or another way to like fling it into my opponent's face. There's also things you can do where you give the card like Trample, for instance, or you could be goofing around with, I think, a Calamity or something. So there's a lot of ways to build this silly guy, but I think Smuggler Surprise is a pretty good way to like cheat it in play, surprise your opponent out of nowhere, and then find a way to deal a ton of damage. So expect a lot of Jumbo Cactuar brews on the channel. It's going to be my mission to win the game with this guy for sure. Next on my list is Shoko, Seeker of Paradise. This is a 4 mana 3/5 legendary creature bird. And whenever one or more birds you control attack, you can probably hear my bird in the background, by the way, which probably says enough as to why I'm so excited for Chocobos, because I love birds. Anyway, look at that many cards from the top of your library. You may put one of them into your hand and then put any number of land cards from among them onto the battlefield tapped and the rest into your graveyard. And then landfall, whenever a land you control enters, Shoko gets +1/+0 until the end of turn. So I like the idea of banned Chocobos because it gives you access to those powerful like Bloomburrow birds. Like Mockingbird, for instance. There's also like other like payoff in form of counter spells and like protection from Bloomburrow still. And being in these colors also gives you access to Ambrosia. So I think the banned version of Chocobos is going to be interesting and a lot more value based. And I think Shoko, Seeker of Paradise is like fantastic payoff. So I'm also looking forward to building Chocobo as like a Gruul aggro deck. But the banned like mid-range strategy also seems really interesting to me, with a lot of like a mid-range value payoff, and Shoko kind of being like the ultimate card there. So definitely the most like hyped for the Chocobo landfall decks, and Seeker of Paradise is going to be doing some really cool stuff. You're in like Selesnya color, so maybe you want to lean a bit into like 1/1 counter synergy as well with Saz's Chocobo. I think you can go a lot of directions in banned colors, and I'm really excited to see if I can find a way to break Shoko, or in general just have a great time with the Chocobos in banned colors. Next on my list is Dion, the Bahamut's Dominant. This is a 4 mana 3/3 legendary creature human noble knight with Dragonfire Dive. For during your turn, Dion and other knights you control have flying. When Dion enters, you create a 2/2 white knight creature token. Then it has a transform effect. For 6 mana and a tap, you can exile Dion or return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control only as a sorcery. They get Bahamut, Warden of Light, a 5/5 flying legendary enchantment creature, with the first and second chapter being Wings of Light, where you put a 1/1 counter on each other creature you control. Those creatures gain flying until end of turn. And Giga Flare, where you destroy target permanent and exile Bahamut and return it to the battlefield so you get Dion back. Now, you're probably like, okay, what are we going to do with this? I think this card is crazy value. I think there are a lot of knights that are very powerful in Orders of Colors and Standard. There's knight support in Final Fantasy 2 with cards like Cecil. You have like a 3 mana like job select equipment, which is possibly playable in here. But Dion being a 4 mana card that is 3 power, 3 toughness, and puts a 2/2 in play, which is a knight token, is going to be great. Like, I'm envisioning this with Elspeth, where you can double the knights, maybe like a Caretaker's Talent, where you can copy knight tokens. You still have those Knight of Malice and Grace in Standard 2, which are spicy. I think Alenda is also a knight. So you'd be surprised at how many good knights there are in Standard, and Dion giving those knights flying is just going to be very relevant. We see how much the flying can hurt when you do Elspeth for her like 0 ability, and all of a sudden everything flies and your opponent might just be dead. I think Knights is going to have a good curve, it's going to have powerful cards, and Ortsov is going to give you access to great card draw and also great interaction. So I'm very excited to see if I can make a destructive, like, Ortsov token mid-range deck that is focused on Knight synergy. Next on my list, I have Hope, which is a 2-mana 2/2 legendary creature human wizard with lifelink. At the beginning of your end step, each opponent mills X cards for X is the amount of life you gain this turn. I think a combination of life gain and like milling is kind of like the ultimate, hater deck. And there's actually like a lot of like life gain and self-mill support already present in Standard. Even in Final Fantasy, we have cards like the Water Crystal and Jador that are going to be doing great things with milling your opponent out of the game. We still have Jace, which can do a ton of damage in the format. When it comes to milling, River Churn Monuments also already really good. And there are great ways to just gain a ton of life in Standard with like an Authority or like that 1-mana case card. And, life gain keeps you alive, and mill eventually, like, gets your opponent out of the game. And I'm really hoping that Hope can just mill your opponent to death, and it's going to be a ton of fun to be able to, have basically two very irritating strategies working side by side to win you the game. Milling and gaining a ton of life. It's going to be a fun one. And last on my list, a card that I am so incredibly excited for, but everybody is kind of like bullying me for thinking that this card is going to be cracked, is Kain, Traitorous Dragoon. This is a 3-mana 2/4 legendary creature human knight with jump. So during your turn, Kain has flying. Whenever Kain deals combat damage to a player, that player gains control of Kain. And if they do, you draw that many cards, create that many tapped treasure tokens, and then lose that much life. Every time I say, like, people are like, oh, copium, like this card is shit. I disagree strongly. I think balancing is so strong in Standard. Think about cards like Into the Flood Maw. Think about like Town Ain't Big Enough. You have cards like Jill also now from Final Fantasy, which can pick up like a permanent not only for yourself, but from your opponent. So if your opponent has Kain, then you can just snatch it. But Kain being able to draw you 2 cards, giving you 2 treasures, like that is crazy value. And it already slots into Dimir Bounce, which is a very standard playable archetype already. So I'm really excited to break Kain and prove everybody wrong. Let me know in the comments if you agree with me or disagree with me when it comes to Kain. Do you think, just like me, that the card is cracked in the mere self-bounce? Or do you think that it's just, a distant dream that doesn't have enough support and, is potentially too risky? I'm a believer, and I will prove you all wrong with this very spicy Dimir Kain deck that's coming up in the future. And I'm staying optimistic, and it definitely is one of my favorite cards to try and brew with and prove everybody wrong. So that's all I have for my most important cards from Magic the Gathering Final Fantasy for Standard Constructed video. Let me know in the comments if you agree and disagree, and if you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much for getting here. I appreciate it. Now, if you end up catching this video on the 4th, make sure to tune in on my Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Ashlizzlle, where I'm currently playing in the streamer early access event. We're brewing with all these cards that I mentioned before and some more, and seeing if I was right about the predictions that I made in this video. Thank you once again for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video, which are going to be Final Fantasy brews.